We're going to move away from the peanut butter costing approach that we did in the last part, and now we're going to move towards the activity-based costing method to allocate the overhead costs, which is what ABC refers to. And we're going to try to determine for both Model A and Model B what is the overhead cost per unit. And so rather than making one rate, and I'll just apologize right now if you hear any background noise. My 5-year-old daughter has decided it's time to clean the bathroom sink, and so those are the background noises. I'm sorry. So we'll focus on the task at hand though here. So what I've done is I've created this little table for us, and I've put quite a bit of work. I mean, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes into setting this thing up, and it'll make answering this question way easier for us. So instead of taking that single rate approach, we're going to allocate the overhead by these various activities that are required for each model. We've got the setup, inspection, machining, and maintenance, and those were all listed to us up here, right? So that's where I got those activities is based on those overhead cost pools that were developed here. And we first need to figure out what kind of an allocation base we're going to use. So in other words, we have this $180,000 of setup costs. How do we spread that out between the two models? And we talked about in class maybe using setup hours, and that might be why you're stuck on this problem. There's nothing listed here for setup hours or number of setups. And so we got to look at what kind of an activity are we given up here that would be reasonable to spread or allocate those costs out over. And I've determined that production runs is probably the best base here, because each production run requires us to set up the machine. So if we're going to set up and run 40 different times to make these 30,000 parts, that means we have 40 different machine setups, and we'd spread these costs then over the 40 and the 60 or 100. Okay, so the setup costs are going to be based off of the production runs. So the allocation total here is the 100, which is the 40 from the Model A, and I'll just kind of recreate that down here. We had 40 from Model A, and oh, I already did that. Sorry. We had 40 here and 60 here. So that gave me the 100 here. So we're going to spread those $180,000 out over those 100 production runs. So each production run is going to be allocated $1,800 of setup. Okay, so watch how I just fill this thing out. So for Model A, I'm going to take the 40 setups we're expected to consume times that allocation rate. And so we have $72,000, and to get that into a per unit basis, I would divide that $72,000 by the total quantity that we're going to produce. And for Model A, the information up above tells us it's 30,000 parts. And so we do the same thing for Model B. It's going to consume 60 production runs times the $1,800. Sorry. And you spread this amount over the 300,000 parts. So it's 36 cents. I'm sorry, I keep hitting that page down button. I'm not used to this laptop. And so there we have it. There's the amount we're going to allocate to Model A for the setup costs and to Model B for the setup costs on a per unit basis. Now I'm just going to real quickly here format these cells to make sure we don't have any rounding issues. Okay, it's 240. I'm going to do the same thing here real quick. So I'm just making sure that Excel is showing us 2 decimal places. Okay, because that's what the problem tells us to round to. Okay, so let's look at inspection next. The inspection costs are given at 140, and we got to figure out how we're going to spread those costs out or allocate them. And inspection hours seems to make sense. We have 800 for Model A, 1200 for Model B, and so that should be a 2,000 hour total that we're going to allocate amongst the two products. Okay, and so here's the 140,000. There's the 2,000 total inspection hours. Model A will consume 800. Model B will consume 1,200. And so on a per hour inspection hour basis, it is $70. Let me do the same formatting here, just to make sure Excel isn't hiding any decimal points from me. Yep, $70 even. there's my formula. Okay, so the total that we're going to allocate to Model A, we're going to take those 800 hours, multiply that $70 per hour, and to get it on a per unit basis, I'm using the same methodology we did for the setup costs. Okay, I'll just explain it again. We're going to take the total inspection dollars that were allocated to Model A, and we're going to divide that by the total 800 hours, and it's $70. Nope, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to take the total $56,000. Sorry, I lost track there. My daughter was jumping on the bed next to me. We're going to divide the $56,000 by the 30,000 parts. $1.87 goes to Model A for the inspection costs. Okay, so Model B, we take the 1,200 inspection hours, multiply it by $70 per hour. That's $84,000. That gets spread out over 300,000 parts, 28 pennies. Okay, we're going to keep going down the line. This machining cost now is going to be distributed or allocated over, we're going to take and use the machine hours, 20,000 for Model A, 200,000 for Model B, and I've already kind of got that in my little table here, 200,000, 20,000, which would give us, and I could just take and add these two columns together, two cells together, and I would say, alright, I'm going to spread these $160,000 out over those 220,000 machining hours, so it's 73 cents per machining hour. The total then allocated to Model A is that amount, and on a per unit basis, you divide that over the 30,000 parts we're actually producing of Model A is 48 cents. Use the same thing for Model B. Take the 200,000 hours, multiply that by the 73 cents, and I take that and split it up over, split this total amount over 300,000 parts. Okay, so 48 cents per part for both of those. And last but not least, we have the maintenance hours, and the maintenance hours, just told you what we're going to use as the allocation base. The maintenance hours, there are 100,000, and they're distributed to the two products listed that way. I've got that down in my table here. So the total allocation amount is this 10,000 plus the 90,000. That's 100,000. To split the $180,000 over 100,000 maintenance hours, $1.80 per hour. So again, take the 10,000, multiply by the $1.80. We divide that number. We divide that number by 30,000 parts. 60 cents. Okay, and then for Model B, we take the 90,000, multiply by 180, and you divide this amount. I don't know what's happening here. You divide this by 300,000. There's 54. Okay, so a couple things I'll note here in this yellow down at the bottom. What I've done for us is I've just run some subtotals, and this just gives me an added level of comfort that we've correctly allocated all the costs. So we know we had 660,000 of total overhead. I know I've got them all here. They sum to the 660,000, and I'm also looking to make sure that I've allocated all 660 between the two parts. So I didn't leave much room for us here. Maybe I could do it in this cell up here. In other words, just to be certain I'm correct, I'm going to add how much I pushed to Model A to the amount of overhead pushed to Model B, and look at that. It's $660,000. I can be confident now that I've correctly allocated or accounted for all these overhead costs, and my per unit for Model A is now $535. And for Model B is $166, and I've left up here what we did with the single overhead rate so you can compare and contrast. So much more tedious, I guess, doing the activity-based costing. I think the hardest part might have been just to get started and to figure out how are we going to allocate these costs. Again, Excel makes this very, very quick and easy for us. So that's the answer to the second requirement for this problem.